Thank you for coming to the Belief book launch event. We're really pleased to have this event virtually this year. And of course, as with every book, it's like giving birth. And we're really happy and excited to have a few of the authors join us for them to read their words, and that really means a lot to us. And we're going to kick off the event with Chris Houston from the Idea Shop. So he's just going to give a bit of an intro, and he's also the marketing genius behind the Belief book.
Thanks so much, JF, and thank all of you for coming to this Canadian Authors Association Toronto and Dark Helix book launch event for Belief. As JF said, my name is Chris Houston from the Idea Shop. I've been helping to promote this incredible anthology over the last few weeks. It's been a career highlight and a thrill to be allowed to bring this book into the hands and minds of many, many readers and reviewers. The Idea Shop is a one-stop marketing and promotion shop for creative endeavors, from websites and podcasts to books and social media. We help everyone find their audience. And I can't tell you what a thrill it was to help people find out more about the great writing from around the world that is contained in Belief. I had the pleasure of getting the reviewers contacting me once they'd received their copies of the book to say how much they enjoyed it and how much it helped them feel connected in a time where we're feeling very disconnected and we're all little squares on a screen. It is a work like this that helps bring us together with stories, ironically, stories of Asian diaspora, but still connecting us with commonalities that bring us all together. And it's been a real thrill to be able to work on this book. I'd like to introduce your host this evening, JF Garrard. She's an award-winning speculative fiction writer, editor, and publisher. She's the president of Dark Helix Press and host of Artsy Raven, a podcast about writing and publishing. We had an opportunity to be on that podcast. It was terrific. She also serves as the co-president for the Canadian Authors Association Toronto branch, and she's deputy editor of Ricepaper Magazine. Her portfolio of books and short fiction is listed on her website, jfgarrard.com, and you can find her on Twitter and Instagram at JF Garrard and on Facebook at JF Garrard Author. So I'm going to hand it over to her. Congratulations to the many, many voices in here and the many of you who are reading it and enjoying it. Congratulations.
Thank you very much for your introduction, Chris. So Belief came about, oh gosh, last year. It was shortly after COVID hit when my co-editor, Alan Cho, was like, hey, do you feel like editing another book? And I was like, oh gosh, another one? Oh, sure, why not, you know? And so we got together and we went through Ricepaper. Ricepaper Magazine was founded by Jim Wong Chu a while ago in the 60s. And it was one of probably the longest running Asian Canadian magazine out there. And it was, you know, it started off as like a newsletter. There was a couple of pages, and it became a print magazine. And then, as you know, like other magazines, so the grant kind of dried up. So then it became an online magazine. But admittedly, online magazines, the librarians really didn't like it because they said it's hard to archive the thing. So, okay, fine. So we started looking at other venues. Should we revive the magazine? Should we do books instead? And since my specialty was publishing books, Alan's like, why don't we try publishing a few books together? So today I spent a whole day baking, and I made this cake. I don't know if you can see it, but it has like a couple of the books that we had published as decorations, and Belief is at the top because this is the fourth book under the Dark Helix imprint for Asian Canadian Writers Workshop. So we'll see in the years to come how it goes, and hopefully, you know, people will learn to enjoy our works. And May is also Asian Heritage Month, so I think it's really important that people, you know, if they have some time, take the chance to read some of the Asian Canadian works that are out there. And in this age of COVID and Asian racism crap that's going on, I hope that, you know, people, when they read the book, they'll emphasize with our community and sort of understand, you know, why are we so quiet, you know, etc. And why are our names like sounding different? Well, you know, everyone has a diverse experience, and I think people are people. Our DNA is the same, but it's just where we're from, right? So anyhow, okay, I've blithered on long enough. So our first reader will be reading Jim Wong Chu's poem, of Christmas. And this is Silvia Leung, one of the co-editors of Belief. So Silvia has written and edited a wide spectrum of pieces in the nonprofit, private, and public sectors, from academic to creative, business to multimedia, technical to policy writing. So she writes a lot, and she was a pleasure to work with on the book. So I'm really happy that she's able to make it, and she'll be reading Jim's piece. So thank you, Silvia.
Thanks. I'll start now. So, Of Christmas by Jim Wong Chu. It isn't the scene for the most appropriate ghost. Although the thought of recent dying thoughts swirls amid the ritual unraveling Christmas morning, the darkest regions of Chinatown awaken, homeless thoughts shed their scabs, the martyrs have burned the heroes returned, and the witches and soothsayers rule. Lord Quan shares his table with the Christmas pagan god, repartee on mercy and love turns, to ice skating on the Sun Yat-sen garden pond, and whether number 99 has Chinese blood. The ice surface is but an infinite lake in celestial Canada. We bring together our loved ones, collect the bones of dead birds, simmer slowly with fresh rice and lotus water into a gruel of turkey juice to sate the hunger of our laundryman past. I wish to straddle the Eastern Dragon and cruise Vancouver Harbor, count the buoys and leave markers along the shoreline, visit the camp of long-dead railway workers, and inquire from the Buddha priest Hui Shen, who sailed this early coast and rode its roller coaster mountains down to Fusan to live among the Aztec. I want to ask him if it's true, if it has to be the way it is, and I am where I am. And the surface of the Sun Yat-sen pond is truly an infinite lake in celestial Canada. And that's a poem.
Thank you very much, Silvia, for reading Jim's poem. So Jim was the founder of Ricepaper, and he passed away a few years ago. And we thought it would be a really great for part of his legacy to have to publish some of his poems that have been sort of unpublished. And his widow, Maureen, gave us publishing rights for this. Our next author is Moni Brar. So Moni Brar is an uninvited settler who lives, writes, and learns on unceded, unsurrendered territories of the Treaty 7 region and the Slicks of the Okanagan Nation. She is Punjabi Sikh Canadian writer exploring diasporan guilt, identity, cultural oppression, and intergenerational trauma. She believes in the possibility of personal and collective healing through literature and art. And her work appears in Prism International, Heart House Review, Exister, The Maynard, Untethered, Hobbit, and other publications. She's a member of the Alexandra Writers Center Society, the League of Canadian Poets, and the editorial board of New Forum magazine. She has worked in 13 countries and is grateful to call Canada home. So Moni, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thank you, JF, for the introduction, and thanks for inviting me to read here and for including my work in the anthology. I appreciate it all. I'm going to read my poem today. It's called Fault Lines, and it was inspired by the time I spent working in Afghanistan. I worked alongside some incredible women there. Fault lines. They float down the streets of Kabul, burqa-clad beings, cloaked in blue from tip to toe. They hover on the edges, less person than shape, more human than men. They stand on bullet-ridden streets, flanked by men in cars, men in masks, men with guns. Tentative hands outstretched to the sky, to the stars, to me. I pass by in gilded cage. Eyes rarely meet through glass, through wounded space, through countless walls built on whim and endless deceit. Driving past, you would hardly notice her, this one with her arms crossed across taut chest, asserting a former claim over something that no longer exists. She sits under a burnt sky, extracts sympathy, distills it into a nectar, sips it in dark corners to deaden memories of the long dead. She feels no regret, but the fault lines on her face tell another story. She cradles her grief like a lapdog that won't go away, stroking its lifeless body. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you very much, Moni. For the next author, a lot of people have told me that she was an inspiration to them, and they are all very honored to be part of this book because she's in it. So I'd like to introduce Joy Kogawa. So Joy Kogawa was born in Vancouver in 1935 to Japanese-Canadian parents, and during World War II, Joy and her family of birth was forced to move to Slocan, British Columbia, an injustice Kogawa addresses in her 1981 novel Obasan, one of the handful of Canadian novels that have become essential readings for a nation. Interned with her Japanese-Canadian family during World War II, she has worked tirelessly to educate and help redress a dark moment in our history. In 1986, Kogawa was made a member of the Order of Canada. In 2006, she was made a member of the Order of British Columbia. In 2010, the Japanese government honored Kogawa with the Order of the Rising Sun for her contributions to the understanding and preservation of Japanese-Canadian history. So Joy, I will hand it over to you. If you want to unmute.
Okay. This is something called Intent to Forgive. There's a little quote from Hitoshi Motoshima. He's the mayor of Nagasaki from 1979 to 1996. And he said, "I firmly believe that the post-atomic bomb era and the 21st century must be an age of forgiveness and reconciliation." Intent to forgive. My mother, born in Japan, died at 90 in Canada in 1987. She was severely deaf and senile. She had been an unyielding disciplinarian as a mother, but she was also exquisitely sensitive and gentle. She was a hand of steel in a velvet glove. She favored my brother, Tim, who was never punished. In any argument with him, I was judged to be in the wrong. I was estranged from my mother for her entire life. My brother died a few years ago in his mid-80s. Today, I'm in my mid-80s, deaf with memory loss. I used to call him almost daily. He didn't know who I was and would say things like, "You're Joy? That's my sister's name." "Yes, I'm your sister." "Oh, I haven't heard from you in a long time. Where do you live?" "In Toronto." "You're in Toronto?" "I'm in Seattle. It's 6 o'clock here. It must be 9 where you are." "Yes, that's right. I'm 3 hours away. It's 9 at night. It's 6 in the morning here." It wasn't just night and day that confused him. He forgot 3 of his 4 children's names. He could still spell and type. He and our father were Anglican clergymen. The one hymn Tim played and sang to the end of his life was, "What a friend we have in Jesus." He remembered our early years and his move to Seattle, but forgot where I lived or what year it was. He remembered our parents. From our powerful mother came the love of God and the love of truth. From our charismatic father came the gift of forgiveness. What better gifts could there be? At age 7, I prayed daily to know the truth. In 2017, a friend, Shirley, and I took an online test for dementia. We both scored abysmally low. It impels me to attempt to write while I still can, if I still can. All my life, I've had a strong sense of meaning, and today in 2021, I have come to believe that forgiveness is my task for this final leg of the journey. It feels like eternity's path. If I can't get to forgiveness, I still have to try. If I fail, that's fine. Failure denotes that an effort was made. There is in my diary a list of notions. They seem to be gleaned from a lifetime of shipwrecks. I picture them as small rafts bobbing along on the sea. They come in handy when I'm floundering, little safety rafts of comforting, useful notions about forgiveness. Here are a few. To be fully known is to be fully forgiven and fully loved. Time expands for the work of forgiveness. Freedom is to forgive. The tiniest, least visible forgiveness is the most powerful. Forgiveness reveals the best friend hiding in the enemy. There is no end to consciousness and to forgiveness. Mercy and abundance, truth and forgiveness all belong together. The road of eternity is called forgiveness. The will and desire to forgive fills my old age. It is attended by a promise of peace. Perhaps forgiveness is one of the hardest and most worthwhile of our many struggles, and is particularly important for one's final chapter. What I've learned so far is that what matters most is to try. It's as important as forgiveness itself. A useful adage for old age is failure is fine. With memory loss and other chills of a wintry season, I no longer expect to succeed in forgiving all, but failure shows I tried. The mere intention to forgive, I'm discovering, is enough. With the intention, a process begins, a door opens, and surprising gifts come rushing through. It's a matter of connecting the dots and seeing the abundance that we've been ignoring. It's a matter of being newly aware of the astonishing gifts that surround us as we embark on this exciting path. And of course, yes, I have forgiven my mother, whose burdens were heavy. It's her faith and her truthfulness that carried her through, and I'm grateful that she passed them on. That's all.
Well, thank you very much, Joy, for making it tonight and reading your wonderful piece. Our next author is quite a prolific poet, actually, Changming Yuan. So Wan Changming started to learn the English alphabet at age 19 and published monographs on translation before leaving China. With a Canadian PhD in English, Wan currently edits Poetry Pacific with Alan Yun at poetrypacific.blogspot.ca in Vancouver. Credits include 10 pushcart nominations, 8 chapbooks, and poetry awards, as well as publications in Best of the Best Canadian Poetry and Best New Poems Online, among 1,789 other literary outlets across 46 countries. I don't know how you keep track of this, but I will give you the mic. Changming, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Okay. I'm sorry to be very lousy with computers and the technical stuff. Thank you very much, Jeff, for your introduction. And I'm very, very proud to be part of the anthology, because exactly about 30 years ago, when I left the University of Saskatchewan, my professor gave me a book gift, which is titled Many Mouthed Birds in Close Association with Ricepaper. And I never thought that I would one day become part of anthology with Ricepaper myself. So that's why I'm particularly proud of this, this fact. And as for the poem I'm going to read, it's very, very short, only 8 lines. And I will read it first in English and then in Chinese. And this poem was inspired by my actual experience when I sent my father's bone ashes to his home village to bury it beside his mom, because his mom died when my father was only 30 years old, and he was always very sorry and sad that he had never had a chance to show any gratitude to his beloved mother. So that's why he insisted us to bury part of his ashes beside my grandmother's home in his hometown. So the title is At the Qingming Festival, a memorial poem for Yuan Hongqi, my father, who died 9 years ago. True, it can never grow like a real seed, but my father's bone ash is so well planted there in the rich soil of his native village. It has kept us hoping and hoping for just another harvest。清明节为悼念袁弘启而做。没错，我父亲的骨灰永远不会像真正的种子那样生长，但是它安置于家乡肥沃的土壤，一直让我们充满着对下一次收获的希望。That's it. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you very much. Our next author, Kathy Quyen Pham. So Kathy is a Vietnamese Canadian writer currently based in Saigon. She has published fiction in Ricepaper, Kajabi, and Node magazine. She's a graduate of the University of Calgary's Creative Writing and English program and a Killam Fulbright alumni. She can be found on Twitter at Pham Manto, and she focuses on mental health and identity in the context of the Vietnamese diaspora, but enjoys writing across the spectrum of literary and speculative fiction. And she was previously an editor and design lead for Node magazine and now works in technology. So Kathy?
Hi, thank you for the introduction, JF. And thank you again for including this story in the anthology. And this
It's
is
an amazing story, so it's fine.
I'm so honored. This is actually, this is only my second publication, like overall in Ricepaper. And it's actually my first book credit as well. So this is such a milestone. I'm so glad that it's with Ricepaper and with the Asian Canadian Writers Workshop. So to give a little bit of context on this story, it's called All of Us. And when I was younger, my family used to go to a lot of weddings. So one thing I noticed about these weddings is that they brought together a lot of relatives from both sides of the family, but also within one family. And these relatives were people who might never see each other ordinarily. So there would always be some sort of drama about, so-and-so's ex-husband coming with his new wife, or estranged sisters being in the same room again. And almost inevitably, there'd be some sort of fight that would break out after people had gotten a few drinks in them. So truthfully, it seemed like the wedding was rarely celebrating a marriage, but it was rather revealing these dynamics in the family. It was like old wounds reopening. And so, of course, the closer a family is to a couple that's getting married, the more immediate that sort of conflict becomes. So I decided to write a story about that. And I'm just gonna get started reading now. I heard wearing black to weddings was inauspicious. So that must have been why I was vomiting into the hotel's hydrangea bush while my brother kissed a loan shark's daughter 5 stories above. My father slapped my back as I coughed up my canapés. We hadn't seen each other in 3 years, but that didn't stop me from asking him for a cigarette to light the bile out of my mouth. I stood with my back to him, searching for the harbor. Outside Shangri-La, you couldn't see the ocean. Too many salt office towers stood between us and the waves, but a sea musk lingered. Salt, tar, shrimp, bile. The surface of my eyes burned with it. I took drags that filled my lungs and charred my throat. I put out the filter with my bare foot. My mother's heels clattered in my hands, and my father followed me back to the hotel with the gait of a hungry ghost. We shared an elevator with a blonde man in a tan suit. He looked at us once and then not again. To him, we were just a girl woman in a wine-stained dress and a bald Asian man with a scar veining across his head. When the doors opened on the 5th floor, the sounds of the wedding flooded in. Vietnamese shouts floated alongside Mandarin, fish sauce dumped into shark fin soup. I slid the shoes back on. My father offered me his arm. I looked away. He hovered a half step behind. His voice reached out to me. "Where'd you pick up those habits?" he said. I replied, "When'd you pick up your girlfriend?" He sighed. "When I want to help you." He grabbed my arm with one hand while fumbling for his wallet with the other. He licked his finger before using it to count out bills. 1, 2, 3, 400. Under the chandeliers, those crumpled dollars shone gold. I tore away from him. I spat out. "It's been 12 years since you even gave me New Year's money. My Vietnamese, worn from disuse, gets caught in my throat. My father flinched. His money rustled when he shoved it into my face. Either his knuckles or the bills smelled of nicotine and Budweiser. I let both hang in the air. I heard, he said, all filmy irises and blinking. You've been behind on your loans. Yeah, you'd be familiar, I said. Save it for your wife. Visas aren't cheap. I turned and stopped. Behind me, my brother glided through the crowd toward us. His suit jacket strained tight against his shoulders. He ignored the people who swiveled in his wake. Their comments, both the calls and the whispers, foundered against him. He towered over most people, me and my father included. Dad, sis, he said. I watched my father grasp at his son with words. Tung, you'll always be my boy, you know. I know, he said. Quyen, let's talk. Tom pulled me by the arm, his smile never dropping from his face. His dimples sank deep on both cheeks. When we were kids, the aunties at the supermarket would look at him and say those were dollar cheeks, a sign of prosperity. Ceremony followed us out. Wedding guests approached in 2 queues. On the left, our Vietnamese, south-hailing distant relatives. To the right, Charisse's Beijing-born family. There's a difference, Tom told me once. Not much, I thought. Same wine, new vintage, provincial blends notwithstanding. He shook hands and dimpled his thanks without breaking stride. When the procession ended, we were in exile by the elevator. My brother let go of the breath he had been holding, perhaps since he'd said his vows. With it, his body folded inward. And that's it.
Thank you, Kathy. Our next author is someone that has a really awesome podcast. So when you Google her name, you'll see that. Nastasha Alli. So Nastasha was born and raised in the Philippines and came to Canada in 2007. And for her writing at the intersection of food and diaspora communities, she won a Food Sustainability Media Award from the Thomas Reuters Foundation. So her work has been featured on CBC Radio, and her recipes published in a top cookbook of 2018 by the San Francisco Chronicle. And she talks about Filipino food, his traditions, culture with guests from around the world in her Exploring Filipino Kitchens podcast. So Nastasha?
Thank you very much for that introduction, JF, and it's really a pleasure to be here. I'm very thankful for my piece having been included in the anthology, and when I first posted about this on my social media, I guess the first thing that I just wanted to share was that the impact and the power of everyone's stories in this book really made me believe in the power of literature. And so I'd like to share a section of my work today. And this is from one of my previous trips to the Philippines. During this trip, it was certainly a very eye-opening experience for me, visiting a region of the Philippines called Mindanao, which is in the southern part of the country. And the main reason I wanted to go visit this place was because it was a place that I had never had the opportunity to visit and experience while we were living there. And yeah, I'll talk about one of the places that I had visited. My essay is called Sticky Notes on a Map. We passed through the farm's wrought iron gates, then unloaded my hiking pack in a pair of styrofoam coolers. Henry, the farm's owner, instructed John, his farmhand, to gut the fish in the coolers. He handed me a ring of keys and led me up to my room, which turned out to be the entire second floor of a net-covered nipa palm and bamboo structure. The space could fit 2 pool tables with lots of room to walk around. Make yourself comfortable. I'll be back for dinner. But dinner, as I knew from growing up in the Philippines, could be as early as 5 or as late as 10 at night. Sometime before sunset, I walked to the lodge's common area and settled myself in a chair. I noticed John in the outdoor kitchen behind me as I lit a cigarette. What are you making? I asked. I could see a pot of rice resting on a ledge attached to the concrete sink. There was another pot that held some type of broth and a kawali, similar to a wok, propped over some concrete hollow blocks that encircled a low wood-fueled fire. Fish tonight, if that's okay po, John said. Nag-text po si Sir Henry, traffic daw po, he added. I'd forgotten how casually the word po was used in the Philippines. Most people use the word po as a show of respect, not just in addressing someone who's older than you, but also for those who are higher up along the social scale. I told John I'd only had the late breakfast that day, but offered to wait. Ah, ma'am, it might be later, he said. Let's eat na po when it's ready. This is my specialty. I walked over to him, and on the table, there were mounds of roughly chopped garlic, onions, and ginger on a melamine plate. There were 2 tight knots of lemongrass. I could smell their fragrance despite the cigarette and the charcoal smoke, and some coarse salt was nestled next to the ginger. The gutted, cleaned fish waited in a red plastic bag next to some bottles of soy sauce, fish sauce, and some other cloudy-looking liquid. Jean was rinsing a large handful of greens that resembled spinach in the sink. What's that? I asked. I don't know the English, but it's that one over there. He pointed to a little patch of trimmed greens that grew inside old car tires, repurposed as garden planters, along the path to the kitchen. Jean scooped the fish with its greens and broth into a bowl and laid it in front of me. I leaned in, unzipped the hood of my jacket, and engulfed myself in its steam. It was the best fish stew I ever remembered having. The greens tasted peppery, the broth was piquant and soothing, and the skin on the fish, blistered from having been doused repeatedly with hot oil, carried a strong scent of lemongrass and ginger despite the tiny amount that I saw John toss into the pot of stew. The other farmhands nodded politely after helping themselves to several spoonfuls of soup and a tiny portion of fish on the table. Thank you po, they all said before walking off into the darkness to eat elsewhere. I bribed them to stay by sharing my pack of Marlboros and asking about other places I need to see in the area. I learned about their families, how long they've been working at the farm, that the karaoke music from down the store down the road would probably go on until 3 a.m. and that posting selfies on Facebook was still something they all love to do. After, John bought a pint of brandy, which he refused to let me chip in for. And someone brought out a guitar and we drank and burned through 2 more packs of cigarettes. I could never have imagined making friends with a bunch of farmhands in the heart of Mindanao over a single pint of booze. Amid crickets that never stopped chirping and the sky as dark and pierced with brilliant stars as I had ever seen, I realized how pointless it was to let generalizations of people and places stand in the way of traveling to experience something I had never before. I'd have to mark the spot on my gilded map of the Philippines with a little sticky note. And the map that I'm talking about is one right here as well, behind me on the wall.
Oh,
Thank you very
cool.
much.
Thank you very much, Nastasha. Our next reader is Bianca Weeko Martin, and I had the pleasure of, I interviewed a couple of our authors for my Artsy Raven podcast, and she was one of them, and it was a pleasure to meet her. And we also went to the same university, University of Waterloo, although at different times, of course, because I'm old and crusty. But anyhow, Bianca is a designer with Filipino, Indonesian, and Chinese ancestry. She was educated at the University of Waterloo School of Architecture in Canada, where she has been based since immigrating with her family from Jakarta in 2000. Her roots in Southeast Asia have informed the bulk of her recent work, which addresses themes of memory, architectural representation, post-colonialism, and domestic space. Bianca is engaged equally in traditional and digital mediums, having split her professional practice between drawing, painting, and writing for independent commissions and designing for the web, particularly for interdisciplinary research organization based in Toronto, Ontario. So Bianca, I'll hand it over to you.
Hi, thanks for the intro, JF, and go Waterloo. And it's a huge honor to be part of this anthology, and even just hearing everyone's stories so far is filling me with a lot of joy. I also apologize for the beeping, my alarm is broken. But the piece I'm going to be reading is about my mom. It's an etymology story about my mom and her name, and she's here right now, and it's probably her first time hearing it all, so hope you enjoy, Mom. What's in a name? Bianca means white. My parents gave me this name because of the color of my skin, or more precisely, the relative lightness of this color compared to all the other babies born in a Jakarta hospital, Rumah Sakit Bunda, in 1996. I can picture the room, which in my mind is a field of little baby beds, a body, mine, swaddled in clinical fabric and fleece, and the face which sticks out pale and strange among a sea of tan. The babies that surround me would have sun-kissed cheeks before the sun even had the chance to meet them. At the age of 4, we moved to Canada, and my early life in Jakarta receded into a dream of some tropical, faraway world. My mom's name is Wawa Chong. That's T-J-O-N-G. As a child, I hated it. I thought the sound of Wawa was strange, and saying it only further alienated me from the cool, smooth Scarborough kids whom I was so desperately trying to assimilate with. Wawa is actually a simplified version of her full name, which is Tianhua, Hua Hua becoming Wawa. Of course, I didn't understand any of these seemingly arbitrary naming conventions back then. While I grew up speaking Indonesian with friends, family, and strangers, I felt confused at home when my mom and her siblings spoke a third language, Hokkien, whose sounds I did not recognize. Chong is my mom's surname. That's probably Chang in Mandarin. I've always found it interesting how fluid family names can be outside the Western world. They're malleable, mutable, shifting silently to suit the language needs of the colonizer. Family names that read like palimpsests of power relations rather than inheritance. In Indonesia, ethnic Chinese people who had been living in the country for centuries were forced to change their surnames to those which better matched the Indonesian language under the Suharto regime. Hua, as in Tianhua, typically means flower, delicate and beautiful. But in my mom's case, it serves the double purpose of recalling a ship named Changhua. My mom was born in 1966, the year Suharto took power. In the wake of this ominous political change, thousands of Chinese Indonesians packed themselves into the Changhua to return to China, my uncle being one of them. Though my mother was named after this historic vessel, it was not her but her eldest brother who went on board to seek refuge in his homeland. My mother remained with her siblings and parents in Indonesia. My mom's name, Hua, speaks to this force of separation, not only between her and her brother, but also the increasing division among the Chinese and native Indonesians during the mid-1900s. And then I sort of skipped a bit to keep this under 5 minutes. Lately, I've begun thinking more critically about my ethnic ties to Indonesia and how my mother must have been formed and tempered by the experience of growing up as part of a scapegoated minority. Whereas my mother grew up in Indonesia in a time of explicit discrimination and even massacres, I was safe and sheltered in a period of flux. I spent my childhood tormented by the need to find ways to avoid admitting the sounds of my mother's name. She filled my childhood with affection and care, her laughs and remarks lighting up all the homes we shared. She had an uncanny ability to fully grasp and feel within herself any pain I experienced, even when I could only express myself with minimal words. Like some magical telepathic witch doctor, she detected and healed migraines and gas pains that regularly overtook my body, and massaged out the burps with cajuput oil and strange ointments. As I grew up into the world of Western academia, I developed a system of values that seemed to conflict with my respect for my mother. Through elementary and high school, I excelled in classes and was taught to praise quantifiable forms of knowledge and intellect. In architecture school, I learned to aspire to boldness, love assertion, and take up space as a young and exemplary independent woman who could lead and innovate in a field where generations ago only men dominated. My female role models were those who read and researched, debated eloquently, and ran their own firms and finances. As a result, the image of my mother as supreme matriarch shrank to a simple woman swept up incidentally in the plans of her husband's immigration to Canada. I had the embodied understanding of her ruling a household gracefully, in tandem and in opposition to the role relegated to my father. The nebulous image of her loving rule did not fit cleanly into the cookie cutter shape of an emancipated woman I had. Eventually, I started feeling frustrated with her and frustrated with who I was becoming and what place I might have in my own unit of society. If my family seemed to function so perfectly at the reign of this immaculately feminine mother figure, what could I ever offer as I strayed farther and farther from the role model set before me? I aspired to surpass her in all the ways I'd observed in my new role models. I started thinking of her as weak because she was loving and dumb because she never patronized others. I boasted the feat of being cleverer than her, even though it was her who channeled all her resources into ensuring I could become the best I could be. But I also thought about how my mother can speak 4 languages and about the deep understanding and sense of empathy that allows her to connect with people from all walks of life. Everything I love about myself, everything others love about me, I've learned from her. Most people placed under similar circumstances as my mother in Indonesia would have become spiteful and closed off. But my mother beat presumptions and became an adaptive and loving person instead. That's all, thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Bianca. I hope your mother likes the piece. I don't think my mother's ever come to any of my events, so you know, you're ahead of me. And I'm sure your mother's very proud of you. So our next author is Kevin Wong, and Kevin is another author we also interviewed for the Artsy Raven along with Kathy. So all month of May, every week, I've been releasing a podcast talking to a few Belief authors. So if you're interested in listening a bit more about their backgrounds and why they write and to listen to their readings, jfgarrard.com/artsyraven. Anyhow, Kevin Wong. So Kevin Wong is the author of Hong Kong Hearts, and he was born and raised in Halifax, Nova Scotia, the same hometown as Sidney Crosby and Sarah McLachlan. He has always loved writing and creating art, and even as a child, he was constantly drawing, painting, writing stories, and telling tales to his friends and family. He won several local awards because of the writing and artwork that he created from elementary school to high school. Although he is Canadian, he is also Chinese, because his father and mother are both Chinese from Hong Kong and Macau, respectively. As such, he possesses a unique blend of heritages and cultures and a special balance of Eastern and Western sensibilities and beliefs. He holds a bachelor degree of computer science and a bachelor of science in nursing from Dalhousie University in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and he is also a registered nurse, something that we value highly in these times of COVID. So, Kevin, take it away.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is well out there where you are. I send my heartfelt greetings to you all from Halifax, where I am at, and or as we would call it here, potentially Haligonia, the true birthplace of the donair, which ironically has evolved into become a donair egg roll. So Halifax really is the epicenter of East meets West, which is maybe how it explains me as well, because I'm in that epicenter as well. Hence my story. I want to sincerely apologize for joining the broadcast a few minutes into after it already started. I had to help my children who are still awake, let's say, and if I didn't help them to do what they wanted me to help them with, it's highly likely they would have found me in this little room here, and then they would have probably wanted me to help them during the broadcast even further, and then I might not be able to read. So I figured I better help them and just do that. so my apologies for that. I want to thank JF and Alan Cho and everyone who helped to make this this beautiful book. I really appreciate the opportunity to be part of it. It's very humbling. I don't think I have anywhere near the skill that the other authors who are in it have, but I feel blessed to be part of that in this same book. So my thanks to Dark Helix Press and Ricepaper for that great opportunity, and I'm very grateful accordingly for that. And so with that said, thank you, Doje Sheshe, Kamsahamnida, Domo Arigato, Merci beaucoup. So again, East meets West, all of the different versions of thank you. So I really appreciate that. I'm going to read the first chapter, which is what's included in the Belief anthology of a novel that I've written called Hong Kong Hearts, and it's chapter 1 that's in the anthology, and it's called chapter 1, The Long Road Home. When I was born, one thing was clear. I was a banana, not literally as in the fruit high in potassium and fiber, but as in I was a Chinese person born in the West, specifically Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Even though I grew up in Markham, a Chinese-centric suburb, Chinese people born in Hong Kong, Macau, or China perceived me as being yellow on the outside and white on the inside. Hence, the tragic term banana was used to describe me and others like me. Yet I am Canadian and Chinese. After all, my full legal name is Liam Chui Han Luo. Luo is my family name, and Chui Han is my Chinese name written as middle names. My parents taught me to read and write my name, numbers, and common words using traditional, not simplified Chinese characters. I could speak passably fluent Cantonese. Watching Kung Fu movies was my favorite hobby, next to watching beautiful Asian actresses. My iPod had as many Chinese songs on it as it did Western ones. Every time a rock song by U2 or Pearl Jam came up, the next song on my playlist would likely be by Fei Wong or Teresa Teng. I'm now 25 years old, toiling as a waiter in a Chinese restaurant serving Westernized food. 2 university degrees were in my name, one in arts and another in education, which led to my current job. Becoming a teacher, a full-time permanent one, was an unfulfilled dream. 5 substitute calls came to me in the past 2 years. And with the bills mounting and my sanity falling, I started working for the Lobon boss and Lobon Leung, boss's wife, at the Ho Ho Hoi Sum restaurant in Markham. I was alive, but perhaps I wasn't living. This thought was what made taking the first step on the long road home possible. I'm sorry, I said, dropping a plate to the restaurant floor. The plate shattered into pieces, and the egg rolls and chop suey it held now decorated a tile in a mix of oranges and reds. This isn't easy for me to say or do, but I think it'd be best if I let you go, said Lobon. You're firing me, I answered in shock. Chui Han, you're a great person, but for your own good, yes, I'm firing you. Some people are meant to be certain things, and for a few people, they are meant to be a special thing. You are meant to do something more than be a waiter. I'll be here for the rest of my life because I need to be here, but you don't. You can go anywhere and achieve anything you want. So leaving this place will be a blessing, trust me. One day you'll say to yourself, my dream came true because I was brave enough to make it happen. When you think that beautiful thought, that is when I would be so proud of you. My husband is right, said Lobon Leung as she placed her hand on my shoulder. This place is too small for you. You need to spread your wings. There is an old Chinese saying, a thorn bush is no place for a phoenix. You're a phoenix, Liam, and you need a special place to shine your wondrous light. We're holding you back here. You need to do much, much more. You'll always be welcome here, Luo Chui Han. You've been like a son to us. Here, take this lucky money for your journey to better days. Lobon Leung handed me a red pocket money envelope that Chinese elders gave to the generations below them. It was called Lai Si. I opened the envelope. Inside it was 300 Canadian dollars. I can't accept this, I said, pushing back the envelope. And I don't want to leave you or this job. I need to pay the bills. We all need to pay the bills, replied Lobon Leung, handing the lucky money back to me. But it's how we pay them that matters the most. Please accept this Lai Si. It would insult us if you didn't. She was right. Out of courtesy, I had to accept the lucky money. I said Dojie to Lobon and Lobon Leung for their gracious gift. Dojie was the formal way of saying thank you in Cantonese, as opposed to Mgoy, which was the casual way of expressing gratitude. Luo Chui Han, have a good journey, spoke Lobon, shaking my hand. We'll keep our eyes and ears open for big news you'll make in the world. And anytime you need to eat, you know where to come, added Lobon Leung, smiling and nodding. I thanked them again and hugged them. My former apron soon hung on a peg, and the restaurant's doors closed behind me. Upon returning to my humble apartment, via email, I finally accepted a job offer presented to me a week ago. I was offered to become an English teacher in Hong Kong. I told my parents my decision. They did not want me to leave Toronto, much less Canada, but they understood my feelings, my dream. I packed all of my things that same night and gave away the rest on the curbside. I informed my landlord my apartment could be offered to someone new by the week's end, for I was about to take the long road home. And by home, I meant the special place where I could finally become who I was meant to be. Thank you.
Wow, that's probably like the best story about someone getting fired and being grateful. But anyhow, I hear my child screaming in the back, so I'll do my introductions and then mute. Our next author, Karen-Luz Sison, I see she is super prepared because she's on this call like 4 times, but Karen is a Filipino-Canadian writer, editor, and content creator based in Toronto. She has had her work published in Ricepaper Magazine, the Globe and Mail, and Living Magazine. Her creative work explores themes of faith, spirituality, and cultural identity. Karen has a bachelor's degree in journalism from Carleton University. Having listened to stories of people from all sorts of backgrounds, politicians and protesters, scientists and poets, to name a few, during her time in journalism, she believes in the power of storytelling as means of creating community and generating change and healing. Currently, she works as a communications and social media professional in a not-for-profit, where she enjoys helping groups tell their stories behind their work that they do and get the support they need to keep going. Outside her professional life, she loves to walk her dog, explore new food places, learn about the world through podcasts, and obsess over hip-hop dance videos. Are you going to do some hip-hop dancing? No, I'm just kidding, Karen. Anyhow, go ahead.
Thank you for that intro, and sorry about the multiple users. I didn't realize when I forwarded the link to people that my name...
I was impressed. I was like, maybe her whole family's listening to this. My God.
Yeah, thank you so much. Ricepaper was the first magazine that ever published any of my poetry, so to be published in the anthology is a really big honor, especially alongside such prolific authors. The poem I'm about to read is called To Heal, To Be Healing, and I think as I grew into exploring my Filipino identity a lot more, I got more familiar with the history behind the Philippines and how there's a lot of colonialism that's influenced Filipino culture, and how that legacy of survival persisted throughout generations. And so that's what inspired the poem that got published in Belief and that I'll be reading tonight. So, to heal, to be healing. We have inherited our parents' scars, birthmarks that sting, survival creases born out of a history of strong brown backs standing straight, pockmarked with smarting scabs. We lash out in anger and pain at those who have come before us until we begin to understand how many hundreds of years it has been since the wound was fresh. I want to face my ancestors and ask, how did you stand when Spanish bullets pierced your skin? How did you walk through the fire of American cannons? How did you plow the land of rice and mangoes with bleeding, burnt knuckles? How can I have the same strength you had? I can almost imagine their tan faces smiling at me, feel the calloused fingers of my ancient lolas and lolos gently examining my own scars, their scars. With their weathered hands guiding mine, we find the shrapnel, the bullets, and we slowly but surely extract the shards digging deep in our flesh. I would not know where to begin healing were it not for my ancestors in whose great shadows that reach across oceans and islands I took solace when the scars stung under the sun. We have inherited our parents' scars, still hurting, but Apo, our strength is already yours. Heal beyond our ancestors' wildest dreams.
Thank you, Karen. That was lovely. Our next writer, Emi, is also another writer I interviewed for the Artsy Raven. Emi Sasagawa is a Brazilian-Japanese award-winning journalist turned communicator who lives in Vancouver, BC. Her work has been published by a range of publications from the Washington Post to Room. She is currently working on a book-length manuscript inspired by her experiences coming out and moving to London, England at the age of 19. Emi is a graduate of the Writer's Studio at SFU and is presently completing an MFA in creative writing at the University of British Columbia. So, Emi?
Thank you for the introduction, JF. It's an honor to be published as part of the anthology. The story I'll be reading today, it's called Between Word and Mouth. I was inspired to write this story by the idea that silence can be a language. So through 4 experiences with death, I explore what it means to mourn in a culture and language you have limited knowledge of. And today I'll just be reading the first section of the story. Each. It's 6:30 a.m. The whole family is sitting around the dining table for breakfast. Gohan, tamagoyaki, tofu, sake, misoshiru. My sister and I eat 1, 2, 3 bowls of rice, each time with a different topping. Nori, furikake, shirasu. Between mouthfuls, I show Hiyobachan, my great-grandmother, that I can count in Japanese. Each, she follows along. Ni, my sister joins in. Son, my dad smiles approvingly. She, Hiyobachan's eyes widen. She shakes her head. Young, she says. I shake my head back. Ich, ni, san, shi, go. Shio iwanaide. I look back at my dad, my eyes pleading for help. Shi and Nyon both mean 4, he explains. Shi also means death. Hiyobachan is superstitious. It's bad luck. I try it again. Ich, ni, san, yon, go, rok, shich, hach, kyu, ju. Hiyobachan claps in approval. I smile awkwardly. This is about the extent of my vocabulary. The last time we visited, I could speak fluent Japanese, but now that I'm 8, I go to a Portuguese-speaking school in São Paulo, and I've forgotten most of the language. Smiling and nodding works for most occasions. When that fails, I call out to my dad. Hiyobachan's 91, but she doesn't look it. She has a handful of white hairs, which she ties in a perfectly round bun. Apart from her hands painted with sunspots, she's almost wrinkle-free. Only her posture gives away her age. Hiyobachan walks at a 135-degree angle as a result of carrying children on her back while she worked the rice fields. After breakfast, she gestures for me to follow her to the bedroom. I drag my feet to imitate her walk. She slides the shoji room divider open, and we take off our slippers and sit around the warm kotatsu table. It's January. The house is cold. Our feet meet in the middle, and she laughs. She turns on the TV and hands me a bowl full of oranges. We sit in silence. At 10 a.m., she looks at me, presses her hands on the table, and sweeps her legs under her knees. She pushes the kotatsu away and digs her feet into the ground. This is the fastest I've seen her move. Hiyobachan puts on a light, full quilted coat, opens the door to her room, and points back to the main house. I don't get it. She gives her coat 2 tugs and points again. I run as fast as I can. I grab my coat, gloves, and scarf. Before we walk out, she picks up a couple of oranges and puts them in her pocket. We walk in the opposite direction to the main house. My mom told me it was once Minka, but now it's just a refurbished 2-story building that isn't even as old as me. We make our way down a poorly lit corridor with piles of OTV catalogs stacked up to the ceiling, then down a set of stairs into the outdoors. She takes off her slippers and slides her feet into pink rubber shoes for gardening. There's an identical pair for me. We follow the fence that separates my grandparents' house from their neighbors. The path is narrow. We're squeezed between a concrete fence and the side of my family's tatami mat factory. I can hardly fit. Then we finally come out to the back of the house, where the workers' entrance to the business is located. We wave to my grandfather and uncle in their blue coveralls. They nod in return. They're carrying 3 stacked tatami mats, holding an end each. I have no idea where we're going. We walk along the street that leads to the department store where I bought my origami paper. We turn left at the small stream where just yesterday my dad showed me how to catch frogs. We follow the main road, then veer to the left until we reach an open space with rows of perfectly stacked box-shaped stones. Gravestones with characters I cannot read. She walks up a small set of steps and stops by one of the stacks. It's a tight space, but I follow right behind her. In front of us is a large stone with our family name carved in it. We are at a cemetery. Hiyobachan removes a wooden dipper from her coat. She scoops up water from a nearby bucket and pours it over the gravestone. From her other pocket, she takes out a spade and a small rake. She tends to the weeds around the grave with surgical precision. Then she takes out an incense stick and 2 oranges, handing one over to me. She lights the incense and props the stick up. She places her orange on the grave. I put mine next to hers. She joins her hands, staring ahead. 1, 2, 3, 4. I count how long she stays frozen. Eyes closed, she takes a small bow. She looks at me and smiles. Then she picks up her tools and we walk down the stone steps, out on the street, back to the house. Over the next 3 weeks, I spend every morning with Hyobachan. We watch TV and sip at the kotatsu. At 10 a.m., we get up and walk over to the cemetery. I become familiar with the routine after a few days. I wash the gravestone, I pick out the weeds. She never asks for help, and I never offer. I just do. Sometimes it's easier to hear when you're both silent. Thank you.
Thank you, Emi. Our next reader has quite a profound poem in the Belief book. This is Carmen Chan. So Carmen is a descendant of two head taxpayers. Claudia Carmen Chan trails 4 generations of transient Chinese Canadian migrants, spending most of her time on the unceded territory of Coast Salish people in pursuit of somatic and emotional rebalancing. She is contemplating and writing about inherited diasporic experience as it relates to embodiment and the supernatural. So Claudia?
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. So yeah, I wrote this piece about a year and a half ago when I just moved to Toronto. I find myself now back in Vancouver since the pandemic.
Wow, you didn't like Toronto? No, just kidding.
No, I like Toronto actually. But
your family's in Vancouver, I guess, right?
Circumstances are a little bit better here in Vancouver for a pandemic. So yeah. So it's a piece that speaks to like the documentation of process and the unseen labor kind of required to move towards wellness from a lifetime or lifetimes of quiet and sometimes not so quiet violence. For me, the experience of exorcism is kind of a gentle one. It feels like a little gentle wiggle. So I've been working with an energetics practitioner to kind of undo a 140-year-old curse of compromised expression or speech that manifests in an autoimmune condition since the time of my great-grandfather. So I've been studying how like the body behaves out of sorts when it believes in the exclusion imposed on it, when it believes in otherness, when it believes in its alienness, when it believes in the shame, and it finds itself inextricable from the white gaze. So the piece is called My Exorcist is a White Woman. I sit across the room from her. As she calibrates my eyes in their sockets with her mind, she expels the shock that protrudes the flesh of my vision, as if I myself watched the Japanese march through a land I've never known, but still is a place of a time that travels through my blood. She resides within me, my great-grandmother who expired from fear at the possibility of a body violated. Can you fault a woman for abandoning her only daughter while her husband lives lonely amongst white men across the Pacific? Her life force chose to preserve her sacred feminine, then to be brutalized, to have her parts cut up, bayoneted, mutilated by an intruder who kind of looks like you, who in a Western time and place would be welcome with this exception, to traverse into Chinatown from Japantown to join your kind on common ground as the whites close in on us. We appear stronger in numbers because they think we look the same. Do you forgive them for a moment as enemy becomes ally, as the whites hurl their violent words at us, break our mortars? Can you forget that the former terrorized the mother who gave life to her daughter, who gave life to your father for something that happened so far away? Still, my body quakes and startles from past wars. It hasn't forgotten the nightmares of my ancestors. It doesn't know how to escape the Japanese, the communists, now the whites, how to escape the body flees its skin, the body flees the earth, the body flees its borders, the body flees until the white woman puts me back in my body so that I can swallow the truth of a clean history that I didn't choose.
Thank you very much, Carmen. That was lovely. And I'm glad you were able to make it for the event. So our last but not least reader is Michelle Zhang. So Michelle is a loving daughter of first-generation immigrants, cooler sister to Vancouver-based musician, devout student of American literature. Michelle is a Vancouver-based writer with questions of art, artist identity, and postmodern culture constantly on her mind. She is currently pursuing a law degree and working on her first translation project. So Michelle, are you there? I was looking on the list and I didn't see her name, but I was hoping that maybe she had called in on another account. So, Michelle? Okay, I guess not. But we have another person here who I would like to ask to sort of say a few words. Alan Cho, my co-editor for this book, to sort of talk about how we came out with this, how he came out with this belief concept. I mean, it was his idea. I give him all the credit. So, Alan, do you want to say a few words?
I'd be happy to. Hi, everybody. Good evening from wherever you are. I'm here in Vancouver. It's lovely seeing everybody's faces. You know, we've been in contact and really have communicated each other really just through textual means. So it's really nice to visually see everybody. How did we come to this name of the title of this anthology, Belief? Really, I conceived of it at the beginning, early days of the pandemic, and really, it was really a dark time. We didn't know where we were going as a society, whether we would get out of this, you know, alive, let alone the anti-Asian violence and racism that was really shocking the world and still is. But never before did we enter a time where it was really, we didn't know where we were going. So I conceived of this title, Belief, very much because it's a belief in ourselves, in Ricepaper Magazine, in the mandate that we have in promoting and cultivating and nurturing a generation of Asian Canadian writers. And I think this is a really successful book launch and really successful anthology, looking at all the authors that we have here on the panel and all the stories that came out of the anthology. Really, why do we do an anthology? I want to share with you this anthology. Oh, this doesn't really show up here as well. Well, anyways, I'll just say the name is Many Mouthed Bird, started in 1991. The Asian Canadian Writers Workshop was instrumental in publishing, getting this book published in 1991. It was really one of the first Asian Canadian anthologies that was created, and really led to blossoming of a generation of writers. Wei Sin Choi, Sky Lee, Jim Wong Chu. They had poetry, they had short stories, and it really blossomed. And a lot of the authors were picked up from publishers because there was real interest in the early 1990s after this anthology was created about publishing these into as full works on their own. So I see us 30 years later. Funny enough, that was 1991 when it was published. Now that's 2021. 30 years later, we continue the work, and I see that this anthology is an opportunity to plant some seeds in the Canadian literary scene, and hopefully to see you as writers getting published on your own right. So that's part of the belief, is that what we do is really important. Our voices are important and necessary, and we stand on the shoulders of giants. Each generation, we try to nurture a generation that can help the next generation, and I'm glad Joy is able to be here as part of this panel, because you inspire us, Joy, and all the challenges that you've gone through and publishing your stories. So you're one of the pioneers that we look to, and we hope that 30 years from now, that future writers can look to you, the authors in this anthology, and can see you as pioneers. So we try to do that and build a generation upon generation of writers. And really, we're, as a country and as a literary scene, we're still finding our way. terms of diversity and inclusion. So I think we're moving in the right direction, but we've had some setbacks over the past year or so, and I think there's so much more we can do. So in a nutshell, that's how the title came to be. It's really a theme of so many things.
Thank you, Alan. Now, does anyone have any questions for the authors? You can type in the chat box. I mean, this event's supposed to end at 9, so we still have maybe a couple minutes. And maybe I should have mentioned at the beginning, I put it in the chat box, but we are giving away a printed copy of Belief on the King Sumo. It's like a digital raffles service. So you can click on the link and see if you can win a copy along with the Amazon gift card. And that draw will happen on June 1st. And Belief is available on Amazon and other online outlets. And on the Dark Helix Press website, you can see everyone's bios and other things they've done. You can check out their websites to read their other works. And as Alan says, like, this book is it's very special. I mean, it's a mixture of very acclaimed writers, new writers, and also some writers that have passed on, like Mr. Ken Lem. But you know, at the time when he wrote his poetry, he wasn't able to publish, but now he can. So it's really lovely to be able to pay respect to other writers that might not be with us, but their words are still here and they still have power. And hopefully, you know, this book will inspire generations to keep writing in the Asian Canadian and around the world, really, because I mean, at this day and age, the internet's everywhere. So people listening in might not necessarily be from Canada. So I don't see any questions. Oh, wait, Derwin.
Hello again.
Hi.
Hi, Alan. Nice to see you again, though virtually. Yeah. Not a question as much as a comment, but I'm looking forward to reading this anthology because I too think it's important we support Asian Canadian writers and give them a platform for writing, right? And so I look forward to reading it. Just want to know, the Asian Canadian Writers Workshop is, from what I remember, mostly operating out of Vancouver. After the crisis ends, do we imagine it's operating local events in other cities?
Yeah, so right now, one of Asian Canadian Writers Workshops, like their big event every year is Literasian, which is an Asian Canadian literary festival. And that's being held online this year. And the Canadian Authors Association has generously gave us some space on their website. So when you registered for this event, you would have seen, well, maybe further down if you didn't scroll that far, but the Literasian schedule. So there are a bunch of events there. We're also hosting Write Rice, which is an Asian writer support group, but I mean, anyone can pop in, honestly. It's a pretty informal group. It's basically a support group for writers to come in, ask questions, talk to one another, give each other tips. But, you know, once COVID ends, in a way, the divide is there, I guess, like the in-person events in Vancouver, and there's also in-person events in Toronto, which we host with U of T. Right now, we don't have any other city, I don't think, as part of the Asian Canadian Writers Workshop. I mean, it's run by volunteers, so in a way it depends on where the volunteers are. So if anyone's interested in volunteering and sort of making a mark and supporting the Asian writers in other communities as part of Asian Canadian Writers Workshop, etc., I'd ask them to raise their hand. But it is a lot of work, but I mean, at the same time, it's a purpose. It's a very fulfilling role that you would take on to sort of help like other generations of writers and support and encourage them. Oh gosh, I want to sound stereotypical, but you know, my mother tells me to quit writing every day. She's like, why are you wasting your time? I mean, in a way, you know, it's a sort of a long-term game. I think writing, you know, you spread your voice, and it's a very, you're leaving your words, you're leaving a legacy, but at the same time, the trade-off isn't there. It's not an instant trade-off, I don't think. So hopefully in the long run, we'll make change, we'll make a difference, right?
Yeah. thanks for that answer. It's nice to hear you give the rundown or the list of the virtual or online events that are and groups that are currently in existence.
I'll add a few words to this. I want to thank Jeannie for your role in Toronto, Jeannie. We don't give you enough credit, Jeannie, for really taking Toronto and growing it there. We have a lot of writers in Toronto, Asian Canadian writers, Sky Lee, Paul Yee, Derwin, you're there, Eric Choi, a number of great writers in Toronto, but we've never connected it in such a way as we have now. And I think with the pandemic, what it's shown us that we're definitely isolated, but it shows that writers are isolated in the first place because they're really writing in a lot of times on paper, but their creative vision is in their heads and they're by themselves. What Zoom and technologies have helped us realize is that we can actually meet each other online and build community that way, because we don't have enough money to fly people left and right and across Canada. Even the Asian American Writers Workshop is nestled mainly in New York City, and it's tough even for the Americans to have a cross country type of organization, and we have the same struggles with the Vancouver-based ACWW. But thank you, Jeannie, because I think you're growing the organization. I think the future of ACWW is in Toronto, because that's where a larger population is, and Vancouver and Toronto can grow it east and west, coast to coast, that way to make it a truly national organization, because we're not really representing all of Canada. So that's the next step in all of this, and we already are. Like today's book launch is a really good example of how we're reaching like Asian Canadians across the country.
Yeah, I mean, if it was an in-person event, I think mainly the Toronto people, well, you would probably have one in Vancouver and we would have one in Toronto because that's where a lot of the writers are. And it wouldn't necessarily be combined and actually some of the writers, I think they're in Saigon and they're in like other places. So they're not necessarily even in Canada. So in a way, having a virtual event sort of gathers us all together as well. So, okay. We have 10 minutes left. So are there any other questions you can put in the chat box for any of the authors that are still here? I think everyone's pretty shy. Nope. Well, okay. Well, thank you everyone for coming to this Belief book launch. As I said, Belief is available. Oh, wait a minute. Is there one message? I'm getting too excited. Oh, okay. Anthologies are a great way to discover writers. Yes, that is true. So thank you everyone once again for taking the time. And I'm really sorry I baked all day and I can't actually give it to a lot of people on this call. I'll meet a couple of writers and hand out some of the cupcakes and to some of the Canadian author folks. But maybe next time when we have a book launch, you'll be in person. Maybe I'll try baking a cake again. And I don't know if you were here, Alan. I was trying to show the cake that the bottom has all the books that we've published. I thought that was a nice tribute to ACWW and Dark Helix partnership. And hopefully, I mean, we've been publishing a book every 2 years, so maybe we'll do this again in 2 years, right? So we'll see how it goes, right? And I hope everyone stays safe with this COVID stuff going on. And yeah, it's dark times, but at the same time, you know, we have to stay optimistic, right? So thank you very much once again, and have a good night, everybody. Okay, bye.